All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's get straight into that conversation. Joining me now is Felipe Jaramillo, who is the World Bank Country Director, Kenya. Thank you so much for making time for us, Mr. Felipe. So let's just get straight into it. So Kenya's deficit right now stands at about 7.3% of the GDP. That is really higher than the projected GDP, which is about 6.1%, which has been revised down to 2.5%. What options do we really have, knowing all too well that local borrowing will definitely lead to crowding out of smaller businesses, and the banks would then rather loan to government and not to small businesses and ordinary Kenyans? Are concessional loans the right way to go, in your view?
Good morning, Trevor. Thank you for that question. What you're describing there that Kenya is facing is something that almost all countries around the world are facing now. This COVID crisis is, as you know, is global. It is affecting the revenues of countries. It is most of them are now having fiscal deficits, and they are having to borrow and spend a bit beyond their means because the population needs support. The SMEs need support. So what Kenya is facing on this is not unique. When a country has a deficit like Kenya, you have two choices. You can borrow externally from international sources, or you can borrow domestically. So this is a balancing act that all countries need to walk very carefully. As you say, you have to be very careful if you're government not to borrow all the money away from the private sector, because you want to make sure that the private sector has access to funding. And so you want to have access to the external funding. At the same time, domestic financing is usually cheaper, and it is in local currency, which has a lot of positives. So it's a balancing act. Kenya has been able to walk this fine line in recent years. And I am sure they will do so again next year, but next year will be more difficult as most countries are facing.
Yeah, we've seen the World Bank intervention in the tune of billions of Kenya shillings. How are you ensuring that the interventions reach the people in a country where poverty levels is at almost 36%? How do you ensure that your interventions reach the actual targeted people?
So we have interventions, across the board in many areas. We have programs in agriculture, we have programs in education, we have programs in health, in environment, with supporting counties, in water, in energy. Some of our programs go directly to the poor. For example, we work with the our climate smart agriculture program with the Ministry of Agriculture, and that goes directly to poor smallholders. It's about helping them improve the way they plant, their seeds, their fertilizers. We have a program for safety net, social safety net. So that goes to the Inua Jami program, which is over 1 million households, very carefully selected. It's orphans, it's really low income families, it's the elderly. So those are very targeted and go directly towards the poor. Then we have programs that are more general, and they're about inclusive growth. For example, we have programs to help counties with evolution, and that is about capacity building, strengthening their programs and their institutions so they can deliver public services to all ordinary Kenyans. We think that also helps raise the standard of living for all Kenyans, including the poor. And ultimately, all of this is about inclusive growth.
Yeah.
Because what we have seen in the past for Kenya is that the more that you grow inclusively, the more that poverty is reduced.
Yeah. And on the corruption, how do you ensure that the money lent to Kenya does not end up lining people's pockets? Are you concerned about that?
We've always been concerned about that. Corruption is a problem in Kenya, in just about every other sub-Saharan African country, and actually around the globe. There is corruption most everywhere, and we join Kenyans in combating corruption. We push very hard to ensure that governments improve their transparency and their internal controls. We help them with the audits, We help them, for example, with this fantastic website over the last year. It's called tenders.go.ke, where you can find now thousands of government contracts, including the owners of the companies that have been awarded these contracts, and then who in government has awarded them these contracts. This is a great use of digital tools for transparency. So eliminating corruption is something that we in the World Bank are fully committed to, and I'm sure that, it's a process. It's not something that is eliminated from one day to the next, and we will continue helping Kenya on this.
So indulge me on this, Felipe. Why is the World Bank continuing to lend to Kenya, knowing very well that our debt levels seem to be very unsustainable at the moment?
No, but we don't share that premise. We don't think that Kenya's debt is unsustainable. On the contrary, we do assessments every year of Kenya's debt, of every country's debt, and we would not lend to a country that cannot meet its payments. For example, we have a few countries around the world that have stopped. For example, Somalia stopped making debt payments for many years. Their debt was unsustainable, and for almost 30 years, we were not able to give any more loans. Now, it is true that in our latest assessment with the IMF, we reached the conclusion that Kenya's debt has now moved up one notch to higher risk of debt distress. That's what we call it. And that means that you have to really watch out more. Our recommendation is to gradually bring down debt. That means you borrow less expensively, you make some cuts in low priority expenditures, and you make sure that you collect all the taxes that are due. And we think that Kenya has embarked in that plan. Unfortunately, the COVID crisis is now creating a serious problem to continue that. So we fully understand that for at least the next 6 months or a year while the economy begins to recover, there will need to be a pause on that plan. But as soon as the economy recovers, the government seems to be very committed to taking the next steps on that plan, diminishing borrowing and bringing down debt, and we will continue to support Kenya as it continues on that plan.
And you mentioned COVID. What role the World Bank be playing to help the countries spur their economic growth post-COVID-19, including Kenya?
Wow, this is a huge challenge. We're very concerned. This COVID crisis, which came out unexpectedly, is affecting every country much more severely than we expected. It's taking much longer. It has affected international trade. It has affected tourism. It has affected many people's incomes and jobs, and we're very concerned about the livelihoods and the lives. So the way we focus, of course, is first in the health sector. We've injected quite a few financing into improving the capacity of Kenya and all the other countries that we work with in dealing with the epidemic. But now, once this phase is over and the health sector is well prepared, we need to move to a recovery phase. And there, I would highlight three things for a country like Kenya. Number one is private sector. The recovery will need to be led by the private sector, so helping SMEs, making sure that they survive the crisis and that they continue to provide jobs. Number two, I would say digital. Kenya is a global leader in digital, and digital has proven absolutely essential in a world of COVID, to be able to work from home, to sell from home, to keep your children in some sort of schooling, to even access medical services and digital payments. And then finally, for Kenya specifically, I think the other big priority needs to be water and sanitation. Kenya still has major chronic water shortages, and it needs to invest in ensuring everybody has access to safe drinking water. Agriculture has water for irrigation and sanitation, especially in the big urban centers, so that everybody has access to good sanitation.
So all these sectors that the World Bank is willing to plug in to support Kenya?
These are all sectors that the World Bank has been helping and will continue to help.
All right. So the other concern is shared prosperity and ending poverty in Kenya. I know that is one of the things that World Bank is really looking at. What is the plan to ensure that it actually comes to fruition?
Wait, Trevor, I did not hear you well.
I was wondering what is the World Bank's ultimate plan for achieving shared prosperity and ending poverty here in Kenya?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the World Bank's plan. We've had a long partnership, and we provide advice and we provide financing. But ultimately, it's Kenya's plan, and it's the plan that Kenyans need to hammer out for themselves. Kenya has had a very good, long-term plan that has been yielding very high rates of growth. It's one of the leading countries in Africa, and we think it will continue to do so. We are very impressed with the private sector in Kenya and how it is an engine of growth, engine of employment. We have been advising the government to continue to provide good policies so that the private sector continues to lead. And, for example, in this doing business classification, Kenya has gone up many spots in the ranking. It used to be something like 120th in this global ranking back 6-7 years ago. These days is very close to the 50th position in the world. So it really has improved. And we think that that's the kind of moves and policies that the Kenyan government needs to do to ensure that the private sector can continue to create jobs. And that's the basis for an inclusive growth model.
Yeah. And as the World Bank country director here in Kenya, the Kenyans who are listening to you this morning, what are some of the assurances you'd like to give them, and what would you like them to take out of this conversation?
No, simply that, the World Bank and Kenya have had a very long partnership. It's been now about 4 decades of work here. That the World Bank is focused on helping Kenya eliminate poverty and achieve shared prosperity and grow a middle class. And that for us, it is an honor. For me, it has been an honor and a pleasure to work here in Kenya and to live here in Kenya. It's a country of tremendous potential, and I hope it will continue to do fantastically well.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Mr. Felipe Jaramillo, there is a World Bank country director Kenya here, telling us that the World Bank will stand with Kenya in the meantime until the shared prosperity